My name is Harper Lane, and the day I walked into my own condo and was told I needed to leave was the exact moment I stopped pretending to be the easygoing daughter everyone counted on. I had just gotten back from a work trip, exhausted but proud. That condo wasn't a gift, wasn't help from family, wasn't luck. It was paid for with late nights, overtime, and side contracts I took when everyone else was asleep. I unlocked the door expecting silence, maybe the hum of the fridge and that familiar calm that meant I was finally home. Instead, I stepped into blinding light. Ring lights. Camera stands. Cables snaking across my floor. And my brother's voice, loud and confident, echoing through my living room as he talked to thousands of people online about his penthouse in downtown Austin. My couch was behind him. My kitchen island. My view through the glass wall that I had worked years to afford. All of it framed as his. My mom was there too, hovering just out of frame, smiling like this was exactly how things were supposed to be. I barely got out, "What are you doing in my condo?" before she cut me off. "You've been away," she said, calm and rehearsed. "The place was just sitting here. Family has rights. Your brother needs a quiet space to work. You can grab your things and stay somewhere else for a while." It landed like a slap. When I said no, really clearly, she didn't even hesitate. She just sighed and said my name like it was a flaw. "Selfish, Harper." My brother laughed into his microphone and told his chat his little sister was being dramatic about his penthouse. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked straight past them into my bedroom and froze. My desk was shoved into a corner, my chair gone, replaced by sound panels and a camera rig. My space had been rearranged like I was a guest in my own life. I opened the drawer in my nightstand and pulled out the one thing they hadn't found, my hidden security drive. I smiled, took out my phone, and made one call. 10 minutes later, there was a firm knock at the door. A calm voice announced itself as the Austin Police Department and asked to speak with whoever actually lived there. My brother was still live when the officers walked into frame. His chat exploded. He tried to laugh it off, calling it a prank, but one officer told him to mute the stream. The other turned to me and asked if I lived there. I handed over my ID and condo registration before my mom could speak. The officer checked the paperwork, looked at me, then at my brother. "So you're Harper Lane, the owner, and you didn't give permission for any of this?" My mom jumped in immediately. "Officer, this is just a family thing. My son is staying here. We're helping each other." The officer glanced around at the lights, the merch stacked against my wall, the whiteboard with content schedules written across it. He said plainly that it looked like a business operating out of a residential unit, and since the owner objected, it needed to stop. He logged the complaint, warned them about noise and building violations, and left. The second the door closed, my mom turned on me. "Happy now? You embarrassed your family in front of the police." "I'm changing the locks," I said. "You have until tonight." And I meant it. Within hours, my brother's access code was dead and my phone was the only thing that opened the door. That night, I got a group text. *Family meeting tomorrow at your condo. No excuses. They showed up the next day like they were staging an intervention. My mom came in first, carrying a binder like she was about to sell me on a bad investment. My dad followed, hands in his pockets, wearing that fake calm he used when he wanted me to back down. My brother came last, no camera this time, but still dressed like he was headed to a sponsorship shoot. My mom spread papers across my kitchen island. Rental listings. Furnished places outside the city. "So here's what makes sense," she said. "You travel a lot. You don't need to be downtown. There's a nice place in Round Rock you could rent for 6 months. Cheaper. Logan can keep using the condo. It's good exposure for the family." My dad nodded. "His streaming is real money now. This helps everyone." I stared at them. "You're asking me to move out of my own home so he can look rich online." "It's not that deep," my brother said. The place was empty. I made it valuable. I pulled up his latest video on my phone. A full tour of my condo. He called it his. Claimed he bought it with ad money. Never mentioned me. I zoomed in on a frame. That envelope on the counter? That's my bank statement. My mom waved it off. Details. I laid out photos I'd taken that morning. Scratched floors. Coffee stains. Adhesive marks from ripped down panels. Then I opened an email from a bank I'd never used. Asterisk welcome to your new business account, Harper Lane. Asterisk my brother's face flickered. I know you use my name and address to open accounts, I said. You have 24 hours to get your gear out. After that, I'm done talking. They left angry, muttering about me ruining everything. I didn't chase them. I called my friend Maya, asked her to meet me at a coffee shop. An hour later, we sat watching old videos. My brother flashing my credit card. Takeout receipts with my name visible. Her face went pale. I thought he was hustling, she said. I didn't know he was draining you. That's when I started saving everything. Screenshots. Timestamps. Proof. The next morning, Maya came back to my place. We pulled security footage. At first it was just noise and mess. Then it got darker. Him opening my mail on camera. Packages addressed to me. My mom showing the condo off to friends like it was a family asset. Maya paused the footage where my work laptop was visible. If your employer sees this, they'll think you did this. My phone buzzed. Building management. By the time we left the office, I was holding a folder full of complaints and warnings. Everything was in my name. I called my mom. You knew about this. She dismissed it. My dad told me not to nuke the golden goose. That was it. Back upstairs, I opened a spreadsheet. Dates. Charges. Lies. Patterns. Maya watched me work. This isn't just family drama. This is fraud. That night, I searched for an attorney. I was done asking my family to respect me. I was ready to let the law explain it instead. The first lawyer I called didn't answer. The second one had an assistant who sounded bored. Before I even finished my second sentence. By the third call, my expectations were low enough that I was already bracing myself to be brushed off. Then a man named Daniel Reed answered himself. His voice was steady, unhurried, like he actually had time to listen. I gave him the fastest version I could manage, tripping over details, apologizing for how messy it sounded. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a short pause, then he said, "Bring everything you have. Videos, emails, paperwork. Today, if you can." His office was in a glass building not far from my condo. Sitting across from him with my laptop open felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unravel on a screen. He didn't react much as the clips played. He rewound parts where my brother opened my mail on camera. He paused when my brother claimed he'd bought the condo himself. When we got to the email welcoming me to a business account I never opened, Daniel leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "This isn't just your brother overstaying his welcome," he said. "This is unauthorized use of property and identity. That's fraud." Hearing it said out loud made my stomach tighten, even though I already knew it. "What do I do?" I asked. He didn't sugarcoat it. He laid out a plan. We would document everything properly. File civil complaints for damages and misuse of my home as a commercial space. Send cease and desist letters demanding my brother stop using my name, address, and property. My parents would be included, because they clearly facilitated it. On the criminal side, we'd notify the bank and the platforms that the accounts were opened under false pretenses. Brands would be informed that ownership had been misrepresented. "It sounds extreme," I said quietly. "Your family made it extreme when they decided your life was a resource," he replied. By the time I left his office, letters were already being drafted. They would land in my brother's inbox and my parents' mailbox within days. As I stood to leave, Daniel added one more thing. Given the police involvement and the hostility on record, I'm going to petition for a temporary protective order. He won't be allowed near you or the condo. 2 days later, I learned what that meant. I was working from home when there was another knock at my door, firm and official. A sheriff's deputy stood in the hallway holding a clipboard. My heart raced as I opened the door. He confirmed my name, then handed me a packet explaining the temporary order. My brother was prohibited from entering the building or coming within a certain distance of me. Almost on cue, the elevator dinged. My mom's voice echoed down the hall, sharp and angry. "You can't be serious." My brother rounded the corner, saw the deputy, and went pale. The deputy read the order to him calmly, explaining the consequences if he violated it. My mom exploded. "How could you do this?" she yelled at me. "You're treating him like a criminal." "No," I said, holding the papers tight. "You treated my life like a brand strategy." My dad tried his usual calm tone, suggesting we settle it quietly, asking me to tell my lawyer to back off. I told him it was already online. The tours, the lies, the address. They didn't care when the HOA and police were on my back. They only cared now. Before they left, my mom warned me that brands would pull out and I'd be sabotaging my brother. I almost laughed. Daniel had already sent letters to the main travel company my brother bragged about. He explained that my brother used a condo he didn't own and accounts opened under someone else's name. Telling the truth wasn't sabotage. It was correction. After they left, the condo was quiet in a way it hadn't been in weeks. Not peaceful yet, but quieter. The mediation hearing came faster than I expected. Walking into the courthouse with Daniel beside me felt unreal. My brother sat across the room with a lawyer who looked like he'd been hired in a panic. My parents sat behind him, my mom rigid with anger, my dad pretending this was all beneath him. Daniel laid everything out methodically. Ownership. Lack of permission. Financial misuse. Misrepresentation. Then he played the clips. My brother calling it his penthouse. Opening my mail. Flashing my credit card. The mediator's expression changed with each video. When it was their turn, my brother's lawyer tried to spin it as a family misunderstanding. My brother said it was just content and exaggeration. Everyone did it. The mediator looked at me and asked how it impacted me. I told the truth. The damage. The fines. The risk to my job. The fear of sleeping in a home strangers online thought belonged to someone else. How my family treated my life like a set. Daniel slid over a document detailing damages and costs. We were seeking reimbursement and a written agreement that my brother would stop using anything tied to me. "I can't pay that," my brother snapped. "You're trying to ruin me." "You ruined yourself," Daniel replied calmly. Then my brother's phone buzzed. His face drained of color. His lawyer asked for a break. When they returned, it was clear something had shifted. One brand had terminated negotiations. Another wanted their deposit back. The mediator suggested reaching an agreement quickly. The terms were heavy. My brother would pay for damages and legal fees in installments. He would admit to opening accounts under my name. The case would be forwarded to prosecutors to decide on criminal charges. My parents were listed as parties who benefited from the misuse and could be pursued if he defaulted. I signed without hesitation. In the hallway afterward, my mom grabbed my arm and hissed that I couldn't mean to make him pay all of that. I told her he was paying for what he broke and stole. My dad asked if I wanted to hurt them too. "What I want," I said, "is to stop being the one who absorbs everyone else's choices." A week later, my friend Maya sent me a link. My brother's follower count was dropping fast. Comments asked where the penthouse content went. He streamed from a bare room now, talking about taking a break. Watching it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like gravity finally working. The day my brother handed over the first check didn't feel like victory either. It felt like a quiet funeral for the version of my family I'd spent years pretending we were. We met in Daniel's office. A probation officer was there. My brother looked smaller without the performance. The officer went through the terms of his plea deal. Probation. Restitution. Restrictions. No new accounts without approval. No using anyone else's name or property. He slid the check across the table and muttered something sarcastic. I didn't respond. When he finally looked up, he said he was sorry. That he wanted to look successful so badly he stopped caring what he stood on. That he thought I'd be fine, because I always was. That was the truth that hurt the most. I told him I believed he was sorry, but that didn't mean trust. When they left, I watched him get into a beat-up car instead of a sponsored SUV. He looked human for the first time. Later, my parents called from a small apartment they'd moved into after selling their house. My mom talked about whispers and judgment. My dad suggested filming a joint statement to help my brother rebuild. I said no. No cameras. No narrative. Healing didn't need an audience. They accused me of pride. From the inside, it felt like survival. A few months later, my condo finally felt like mine again. The walls repainted. Floors refinished. The neon reflections gone. I upgraded my security, not out of fear of strangers, but because I'd learned that sometimes the biggest threats come with your last name. Life settled into something quieter. Work. Friends. Normal routines. One night, sitting on my couch with Maya, I told her I'd written everything down anonymously online. Changed names. Same story. I didn't expect much. There were hundreds of responses. People saying they thought they were alone. That it helped to see someone choose themselves. I didn't block my brother. I kept replies short. I hoped he really was changing. My parents and I spoke less, but more honestly. When guilt crept in, I ended calls without explanation. Sitting on my balcony one morning, coffee warm in my hands, I looked out at the skyline and realized something simple. Family isn't a free pass to your life. Love without respect is just control. And for the first time, my home felt like peace. After everything went quiet on the legal front, I expected relief to rush in and fill the space. That's what people always talk about, right? Closure. Vindication. Justice. Instead, what I felt at first was this strange, hollow calm, like the air after a storm when everything looks normal but you're not convinced it's actually over. My condo was finally quiet, truly quiet, but my phone wasn't. There were texts I didn't open. Missed calls I let ring out. Notifications from people who suddenly remembered I existed now that my brother's life was visibly falling apart online. Distant relatives asking vague questions that were really fishing for gossip. Old family friends pretending to check in on me while clearly trying to figure out which version of the story they should believe. I stopped explaining. For most of my life, I had been a professional explainer. Explaining why I couldn't lend money this time. Explaining why I needed my space. Explaining why I was tired. Explaining why something hurt me even if it didn't look like a big deal to anyone else. Somewhere along the way, I'd been trained to believe that if I could just explain things well enough, people would finally understand and stop crossing lines. What I was learning now was that people who benefit from misunderstanding you have no interest in clarity. My brother tried calling twice the week after the mediation. I didn't answer. He left one voicemail, short and awkward, saying he had questions about the payment schedule and asking if we could talk like adults. I forwarded it to Daniel and let him handle it. That alone felt like a small revolution. The old version of me would have rushed to smooth things over, to make it easier for everyone else, even if it made my chest tight for days afterward. Instead, I went to work. I threw myself back into my job, grateful for tasks that were logical and clean and didn't come with emotional strings attached. Code didn't guilt trip you. Systems either worked or they didn't. Vulnerabilities could be identified, patched, and monitored. There was something deeply comforting about that after months of chaos. In the evenings, I reclaimed my condo inch by inch. I rearranged the furniture not because it needed to be moved, but because I wanted to choose where things lived. I replaced the couch, not out of necessity, but as a marker. This is mine. I bought new plants and watched them slowly perk up in the sunlight like they trusted the space more than the old ones ever had. One night, while scrolling mindlessly, I stumbled across a forum thread about family financial abuse. I hadn't searched for it. It just appeared, like the internet knew exactly where my thoughts had been circling. I clicked, then kept reading, then realized hours had passed. Story after story sounded painfully familiar. Parents opening credit cards in their kids' names. Siblings borrowing assets and never returning them. Adult children being told they were selfish for wanting independence. I wasn't special. I wasn't uniquely cruel or dramatic. I was part of a pattern that existed in far too many families, quietly normalized under the word support. That's when I decided to write my own story. I changed the names. I changed the city. I softened some details and sharpened others, trying to capture the feeling more than the facts. I wrote about walking into my home and being told to leave. About watching my life get repackaged as content. About the moment I realized love was being used as leverage. When I finished, my hands were shaking. I almost didn't post it. There was still that old voice in my head whispering that I was airing dirty laundry, that I was being disloyal, that someone might recognize themselves and get angry. But another voice, quieter and steadier, reminded me that silence had never protected me before. I hit post and closed my laptop. The response was overwhelming in a way I hadn't expected. People didn't ask for updates or demand drama. They thanked me. They shared their own stories. They said things like, "I thought I was crazy until I read this," and "I needed permission to say no, and this gave it to me." I didn't reply much. I didn't need to. Just knowing the words landed somewhere real felt like enough. Around that same time, my parents tried again. This time, they didn't show up unannounced or demand meetings. They called, carefully, like they were approaching a wild animal. My mom's voice sounded thinner than I remembered. She told me they were struggling financially, emotionally, socially. That people treated them differently now. That church felt uncomfortable. That old friends had gone quiet. "This has followed us," she said, like the consequences had sprouted legs and chased them down. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, there was a pause where I knew she was waiting for me to jump in and fix it. To offer reassurance. To promise things would blow over. "I'm sorry you're hurting," I said finally. And I meant it. But I'm not responsible for making this go away. She didn't like that answer. Neither did my dad, who got on the phone next and suggested, again, that we could all sit down together and talk things out. He framed it as healing. Growth. Moving forward. I recognized the pattern immediately. A conversation without accountability. Resolution without repair. I said no. There was anger after that. Accusations that I was holding grudges. That I was cold. That I'd changed. All of it was true, in a way, and I wasn't ashamed of it anymore. Change was the point. Weeks passed. Then months. My brother made his payments on time, at least so far. Daniel kept me updated, but otherwise, I stayed out of it. I heard through mutual acquaintances that my brother was working retail now, selling equipment he used to show off online. That some customers recognized him and some didn't. That he hated it and also found it weirdly grounding. I didn't feel joy at that. I felt distance. And distance, I was learning, could be healthy. The condo slowly stopped feeling like a crime scene and started feeling like a home again. Not the old version of home I'd clung to, where I was constantly bracing myself, but a new one built on quiet and choice. I slept better. I laughed more easily. I noticed how much energy I'd been spending managing other people's emotions and how much lighter life felt without that constant weight. One evening, sitting on my balcony as the sun dipped behind the skyline, I realized something that startled me with its simplicity. I wasn't angry all the time anymore. The sharp edge had dulled, replaced by something sturdier. Acceptance, maybe. Or just clarity. I could love my family and still not let them run my life. That truth didn't magically fix everything, but it gave me a foundation I'd never had before. One that didn't crack under pressure. One that didn't require me to disappear to keep everyone else comfortable. I thought about all the times I'd been told I was strong growing up, how that word had been used to justify giving me less support and more responsibility. I wasn't interested in being strong like that anymore. I wanted to be safe. I wanted to be whole. And for the first time, those things didn't feel mutually exclusive. As more time passed, something unexpected happened. The story stopped feeling like an open wound and started feeling more like a scar. Still there, still part of me, but no longer bleeding every time I touched it. I didn't wake up thinking about court dates or bank statements anymore. I woke up thinking about normal things. Coffee. Deadlines. Whether I wanted to go for a run or stay in bed a little longer. That shift felt almost suspicious at first, like I was doing something wrong by moving on. There were moments, though, when the past tried to reassert itself. A random noise in the hallway that made my shoulders tense. An unfamiliar number lighting up my phone. A memory triggered by a passing comment about family loyalty that sent a flash of heat through my chest. Trauma doesn't disappear just because justice shows up. It lingers, waiting to see if the danger is really gone. I learned not to fight those moments. I let them pass. My parents called less often after it became clear I wasn't going to fold. When we did speak, the conversations were oddly stripped down. No big emotional performances. No guilt-laced monologues. Just updates about logistics, health, weather. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't explosive either. It felt like a ceasefire more than a reconciliation. Once, my mom slipped and said, "You know your brother wouldn't be like this if," and then stopped herself. The silence that followed told me more than the sentence ever could have. For the first time, she didn't finish the thought by blaming me. That mattered. My brother didn't call again after that first voicemail. Everything went through lawyers or probation channels. I sometimes wondered what he told people now when they asked about his life. Whether he framed himself as a victim or owned his mistakes in small, quiet ways. I didn't need to know. Not knowing was part of my peace. What surprised me most was how much space opened up in my life once I wasn't constantly reacting to my family. Evenings stretched longer. Weekends felt fuller. I picked up hobbies I'd abandoned years earlier because they'd seemed impractical or indulgent. I started painting again, badly and happily, without worrying about whether it was useful. I signed up for a yoga class just because it fit my schedule, not because someone else expected something from me afterward. Maya noticed the change before I did. "You're lighter," she said one night as we sat on my couch, takeout containers between us. Not happier exactly. Just steadier. That word stuck with me. Steady. It felt right. I told her about the occasional guilt that still crept in, the voice that whispered I'd gone too far, that family was supposed to mean forgiveness no matter what. She didn't argue with me. She just asked, "Would you tell someone else to go back into a burning house because it used to be warm?" The answer was obvious. So was the implication. A few weeks later, I ran into a neighbor from my building in the elevator. She hesitated, then apologized for assuming things earlier in the year. For the noise complaints. For the looks. She said she hadn't known it wasn't my doing. I smiled and told her it was okay. And I meant it. Her opinion no longer felt like a verdict on my character. It was just information. That was another quiet shift. I stopped needing external validation to feel grounded. I trusted my own read on my life. One afternoon, while organizing paperwork I no longer needed to reference daily, I found an old photo of my family from years ago. We were smiling, arms around each other, captured in a moment that looked happy and uncomplicated. For a second, grief hit me hard. Not for what we were, but for what I believed we could be if I just tried harder. I let myself mourn that version of the future. Then I put the photo back in the drawer and closed it gently. Letting go didn't mean pretending the good moments never existed. It meant accepting that they didn't cancel out the harm. As the months went on, my condo became a place I loved being in, not just a place I defended. Friends came over again, the right ones. The kind who asked before moving things, who cleaned up after themselves, who didn't treat my space like a backdrop. Laughter returned, softer and more genuine than the forced cheer of content creation ever was. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about how close I'd come to losing all of this. Not just the condo, but my sense of self. How easy it would have been to give in, to move out, for a while, to let resentment turn inward instead of outward where it belonged. The thought made me shiver. I didn't save myself by being louder or tougher. I saved myself by being clear. Clear about what was mine. Clear about what was unacceptable. Clear about the fact that love doesn't require self-erasure. That clarity didn't make me popular. It didn't make me the hero of every family story. But it made me honest, and honesty turned out to be far more sustainable than approval. There were still hard days. Days when I wondered if things could ever be different. Days when I missed my parents in the uncomplicated way children are supposed to miss them. On those days, I reminded myself that boundaries aren't punishments. They're instructions for how to treat me if you want to stay in my life. Some people read instructions. Others tear them up. I wasn't responsible for which group my family chose. By the time a full year had passed, the story no longer felt like something that was actively happening to me. It felt like something that had happened, something that shaped me, but didn't define every step I took anymore. That distinction mattered more than I ever expected it to. I wasn't living in reaction mode. I wasn't bracing myself for the next crisis. I was just living. My mornings were quiet in the best way. I'd sit on my balcony with coffee, watching the city wake up, and feel grounded instead of on edge. There were no ring lights casting artificial glow through my windows anymore. No strangers pacing my hallway. No sense that my home could be taken from me if I relaxed for even a second. Peace settled in slowly, then all at once, like my nervous system finally believed the danger had passed. People sometimes ask what it feels like to win, something like that. To stand up to your family and come out the other side. I never know how to answer. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like reclaiming oxygen after holding your breath for years. Necessary. Quiet. Almost invisible unless you've lived without it. My brother kept up with his probation requirements. I heard updates through Daniel, never directly. He didn't miss payments. He didn't violate the order. On paper, he was doing everything right. I hoped, genuinely, that meant he was learning something underneath all of it. Not because I needed him to change for my sake, but because I didn't want all of this pain to be pointless. Accountability without growth is just punishment. Accountability with reflection has the potential to become something else. I didn't rush forgiveness. I stopped treating it like a finish line I was obligated to cross. Some things take time. Some things may never fully resolve, and that's not a personal failure. It's reality. My parents and I settled into an uneasy, quieter rhythm. Fewer calls. Shorter conversations. Less pretending. When we talked, it was clear they were still adjusting to a world where I wasn't automatically available to absorb stress, fix mistakes, or smooth over consequences. Sometimes my mom sounded like she wanted to slip back into old habits, to hint at how hard things were, to see if I'd step in and make it easier. When that happened, I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just gently redirected or ended the call. That alone felt like growth. I noticed how much calmer my body felt around them now that I wasn't constantly negotiating my worth. I wasn't trying to earn respect by being agreeable. I wasn't trying to prove I deserved basic consideration. I showed up as myself or not at all. There's a strange grief that comes with that kind of boundary. You realize how much of your identity was wrapped up in being needed. In being useful. In being the reliable one who never made waves. Letting go of that role can feel like losing a part of yourself, even when that part was hurting you. I let myself grieve it. But I also let myself enjoy what replaced it. The freedom to make decisions without consulting anyone. The joy of saying yes because I wanted to, not because I felt obligated. The quiet confidence that came from knowing my life was no longer up for negotiation. One evening, I reread the anonymous post I'd written months earlier. The comments had slowed, but people were still finding it. Still leaving messages about how it helped them recognize patterns in their own families. I didn't respond, but I sat with the realization that something deeply painful had turned into something unexpectedly connective. That didn't excuse what happened. It didn't justify the damage. But it reminded me that even the worst experiences can sometimes create clarity for others. That felt meaningful. I thought back to the moment I stood in my doorway, being told to move out of a life I had built with my own hands. To how small and stunned I felt in that instant. To how desperately I wanted someone, anyone, to step in. And say this wasn't okay. What I didn't know then was that I was going to be that person for myself. That's the part people don't talk about enough. Standing up for yourself isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet paperwork. Sometimes it's uncomfortable silence. Sometimes it's choosing not to answer a call and trusting that your reasons are valid even if no one else agrees. Boundaries aren't betrayals. They're acknowledgments. They acknowledge that you matter. That your safety matters. That your work, your home, your name, and your peace are not communal property just because someone shares your blood. If you ever find yourself being told you're selfish for protecting what you built, pause. Ask yourself who benefits from you believing that. Ask yourself why your no feels like such a threat to them. Chances are, it's because they were relying on your silence. I don't hate my family. I don't wish them harm. I simply refuse to be collateral damage in their story anymore. I chose myself, not out of spite, but out of necessity. And every time I unlock my door and step into a home that feels safe and fully mine, I know I made the right choice. Peace didn't come from reconciliation. It came from respect. And when respect wasn't available, distance became the most loving option left.